Welcome back to the Rooted Home Life podcast, where we talk all about cultivating home and chasing adventure with our kids. If you're new here, I'm the host, Christina. I'm a mom of 5 children, ages 4 through 17, and I am passionate about not only cultivating our home and a strong family culture, but also getting out and adventuring with my children. I hope that you find encouragement here in both of those areas and everywhere in between. Today, I am sitting down to chat with Nichole Holtz all about chasing adventure with our kids. I'm so excited because our first episodes really focused heavily on laying the foundation of cultivating a strong family culture in our homes. And today we are finally going to jump into talking about chasing adventure with our children and what that can look like. So join me as I sit down with Nichole to talk all about chasing adventure with our kids. Hi, Nichole. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you because something that I don't know if I told you is that ever since I started this podcast, you were one of the first people in my mind to have on
Oh,
because I love following you over on Instagram and all of your adventures and how you homeschool. And it's just so inspiring to me. So I'm like, if there is anywhere out there, any other moms that are not following you over on Instagram, it's so cool for them to get to know you here and then get to follow you over there. And so I'm super excited to have you because especially the first few episodes, the first handful of episodes focused so heavily on cultivating home. And I just really felt like rooted home life, cultivating home, chasing adventure, like we needed to start with that part. But I feel like we have enough of that a foundation now that I'm like, all right, now it's time to talk about adventure. So you're like the first person and the perfect person to come on and start talking about adventure. So super excited about that.
oh, I'm so honored by that. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. So in case they don't know you, for anyone who's listening that doesn't know you, can you just share a little bit about yourself?
I sure can. So, hello, my name is Nichole Holtz. My family and I live in Southwest Arkansas, but we are transplants from the Midwest, so I will still cling heavily to saying you guys instead of y'all. It just doesn't roll off my tongue, despite having lived down this way for 10 years. We're a homeschool family. I have a son who's now 13 and a daughter who's 10. We've homeschooled from the very beginning. I was not homeschooled, nor was my husband. We kind of did, we had the quintessential high school, college experience, but we decided to homeschool from the get-go, and it's been the best decision possible for us. My Instagram handle is Coley Ray. It's ColeyRaeh, and I know it makes absolutely no sense. So I'll explain it briefly. Ray is my middle name. My name's Nicole, and when we were growing up, my sister couldn't say my full name when she was little, so she just called me Coley. And when I first made a public account back in 2017, all of the handles I wanted were taken. So that's how I landed on Coley Ray.
That's really cute. I love that.
Thanks. My sister
I'm glad.
loves the little nod to her too, because she still calls me Coley, so I love it.
I'm kind of glad that it stuck with you because it has like a cool story.
Thank you. It's one of
Just
those
something cool to share.
Yeah, and I've thought about changing it so many times to something that like makes more sense. But I kind of like that it doesn't make any sense because it's memorable by the fact that it's odd. And at this point, my page has grown, and I have work dispersed in so many different corners of social media and the internet. I just don't want to change it. So I am Nichole Holtz, also known as Coley Ray.
Yes, I love it. So can you share with us a little bit about like how you started adventuring with your kids? Like, were you always adventurous before having kids? Is it something that you started alongside your kids?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will try to dilute this to as short of a story as possible. I was always pretty adventurous growing up. I was always the one like leading hikes with my friends, going to explore as often as I could. But I also swam competitively at a pretty high level. I swam Division 1 on scholarship in college, and because of that, my pretty much my entire childhood revolved around a pool, and there was a lot of things I wanted to do, but I couldn't because the risk of injury for swimming was so high. And due to just some tough circumstances when I was growing up and a really rough divorce my parents went through, a scholarship was kind of needed to get to the college that I wanted. So swimming was a top priority. And I'm so grateful for that. I wouldn't have changed a thing. And through all that, my mom was also very adventurous. She was always someone who, they may not have been big adventures, but she's someone who always drew close to nature and drew close to spending time outside, especially through challenging times. And so that rubbed off on my sister and I. And we've got, even my sister and I both have this creek that anytime we're back in Iowa, we go visit this specific creek because it's so meaningful to us back in Iowa. So I grew up always having a love for nature, and then moving into adulthood, my husband and I got married. Took us a few years, but we had our son, and it wasn't long after that we ended up moving. So we ended up moving. I'm sure this is relatable to a lot of people. We ended up moving 19 hours away from our family, to an
Wow.
area where we didn't know a single soul. We didn't know anybody. We moved for my husband's job. I said we moved to, it's actually Texarkana. And I said, Texar where? It's a small city that sits right on the border of Arkansas and Texas. So we live on the Arkansas side, but we go to Texas every day. Sometimes we go to Louisiana. Um, it was a very big adjustment. My daughter was born about 6 months after we moved here. So, as you know, like there was a lot of big things that happened with this move, and I felt very unsettled because you talk about roots, right? Like we just didn't have a lot of roots here, and I was the one that kind of had to start digging that soil to put those roots down. And we made the decision to homeschool, but it was actually prior to the decision to homeschool that I just realized, you know what, I don't want to have to wait necessarily for my husband to be able to take time off. It started actually because I didn't want to wait to him to take time off so I could go see my mom. I had
Mm.
an infant and a toddler, and I remember lining up like 10 pacifiers along the dashboard of my car so I could hand them back to my son and he could give them to my daughter because I
Oh my
just
goodness.
wanted to be able to make it back to Iowa. I adore my husband. I adore my husband, and he's so supportive and comes with us anytime that he could. But it felt silly to me to ask him to take 2 days off of work just to help me drive back so I could see my mom. So that's where it started, is I moved so far away from family. I wanted to learn how to do the thing myself. So the first time, I think we made it about 4 hours down the road before everybody was in tears. But we made it. It took us 2.5 days, 3 days. But over time, I got really good at traveling by myself with my kids, and we shaved it down to a day. And then it grew again because I realized, you know what, I feel pretty confident doing this thing. It's hard, but if we're going to do something hard, why not do something hard in a beautiful place and add some fun along the way? So we kind of started chasing little rabbit trails along these road trips to go do cool hikes and experience cool things and go chase waterfalls. And those back and forth trips between Iowa really helped me kind of build up my strength. It's not the way I would recommend it. I would recommend starting smaller. We just went gung ho from the beginning, but that's really how it got started. It was just out of a deep need to connect to my family because I didn't feel connected at home where we are. Now, obviously, that has since changed. I absolutely love where we live, and we've burnt up every back road between here and about a 5 hour radius exploring. But that's how it started, was just not having family around and feeling like, all right, we're going to figure this out. And off we went.
That's really cool. I love that you just went for it instead of being like sad and missing your family and just being like, well, we're too far away. You're like, I'm going for it.
Yeah, and it was that.
The
And I think,
baby too.
right, yes, with the babe, she was, yeah, about six, no, younger than 6 months when we started doing it. So she was very much a baby. And I think I'm someone who really thrives on novelty and new adventures and experiencing new things. And I think part of that just stems from growing up. I couldn't do a lot of those things because I couldn't miss swim practice, or I couldn't risk getting injured. And so now I'm like, well, let's go rock climbing because who cares if no, I am careful, but I think I just thrive on those new experiences. And so that's also for my husband too. He and I, we're the type of people that are going to read every sign in a museum and spend all day there. And we need a lot of time to explore places because we have so much fun really diving deep. And for us, moving into this new area, once we kind of started to feel a little bit more comfortable, we were like, let's see everything there is to do here because it's all new for us. We are from the Midwest, and moving to an entirely new area, it felt like every weekend the four of us could go and discover something new. And then when we made the decision to homeschool, I was like, well, we may homeschool, but we don't really often stay home because for me, being someone, a transplant from here, I'm seeing things through fresh eyes, and I could see all of these incredible opportunities for things that we could go and do and see within a day trip.
I love that. So many things that you mentioned I want to talk about, but I'm gonna try to I'm gonna try to stay focused. So many things I'm like, yes, that too. But So you had like this great motivation to travel because of your family, right?
Hmm.
Which I feel like is great. I feel like sometimes when we have situations that almost like force us to get out of our comfort zone, it can be helpful because then you're like, oh, I'm so glad that I had to do that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So what about the moms that like they don't really have a reason where they like have to. They don't have like this huge motivating factor on the other end, or they want to test out being like more adventurous, but they're like, I'm not an adventurous person. I don't know what I'm doing. They feel intimidated, don't know where to start. Like, what advice can you give those moms?
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
that
So
mom. So I'm
I
like,
get it. I get it. Like honestly, in all truthfulness, like if you peel back the layers, our adventure started out of desperation. And part of that was to pull myself out of postpartum depression. And part of that was I just felt like it was really, I mean, I went like 20 hours away for college, which is a whole other story. But after I moved home and then having kids, I just, there was this like deep need for me to just find something that fulfilled me in a different way. Obviously, motherhood is incredibly fulfilling, but it's also incredibly, it tests you. And so
mhm,
that's where it started from for me. But something I want to address is oftentimes people think of adventure as, bagging big mountain peaks or boondocking out in these amazing places out west, which is just like camping without any hookups. Also, we tent camp. We don't have an RV, or we backpack tent. It's very small. Um, or just the ideas are you get on a plane and you jet set off to another country. And I just want to dispel that because my family and I, my kids and I live a really adventurous life, but the majority of those adventures are things that we did within an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, or even right here in our own city. We're very lucky to have a park with a 10-mile trail, mountain biking trails right here in my city. And so the first thing I would do for the mom that's feeling hesitant is to invite them to change their mindset and change their perspective because adventure is what you decide that it is.
mhm.
And adventure is really a mindset. And in our family, we have a motto where we choose to see the wonder wherever we wander. And, if you can go to a park in your neighborhood or in your city or the next city over, if you can go into these experiences with a mindset of adventure and wonder, that's the first step. A lot of times it feels really daunting and scary because you see a lot. I mean, we see a lot on social media about, I traveled the world with my kids, or we took a gap year and we sold everything. And those are amazing adventures, and I applaud those families, but that's not what we wanted. And um, I just think it's important to address mindset to begin with and recognize that adventure is it can be anything and it's different for everyone. Everyone has a certain level that they're comfortable with. I'd like to invite you to toe the line of where you're comfortable, but just recognize that it's different for everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah, both of those things that you mentioned about like starting small, starting locally, and then how you mentioned like going on your own and not waiting for your husband to be able to take time off. I relate to so much because I did start out very small because I did not have a lot of confidence. I was not an adventurous person. Like I grew up in the city, and even then, like you can be like a person who loves nature and adventure and live in the city, but that just
Yes.
still wasn't me. Um, but I just had started to have an interest for it and wanting to show my kids things and honestly, like needing to get out of the house with five
Mhm.
children and not having a large home and not having a huge amount of land for them to run around outside. I'm like,
Yes.
we need to like go, we need to get out,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And my husband works a ton and doesn't have a super flexible schedule. So if we waited
Mm.
for him, we wouldn't
You'd
go
never
very
go.
often. Yeah, so I love that you brought up both of those things because I feel like those can be two kind of like roadblocks for moms who feel like they can't do it. Like there's no way I can do this on my own and there's no way I can just like we're gonna go on some mountain hike and I've never even gone on a nature trail with my kids, you know.
Yeah.
So I
I
love
mean,
that you
really, step one, like you said, it's starting small. And step one, I mean, I remember before we took off on these road trips on our own, like it was a really big deal that I got to the park across the street and back with
mentioned.
everybody intact, when my daughter was very, very, very much a newborn baby. So I think it is, adventure is starting wherever you're at. So if that means you get everybody packed up in the car with a picnic lunch and you go to a city park and have maybe someone's crying by the end of it, but you know what, you did it. And I think I totally agree with you. It's really important to start small and start where you're at and look at, okay, what's the thing, where's my line and where can I start nudging that line? Um, and that it's different for everybody.
Yeah, that's so good because while you're describing it, I'm like, that's like kind of what we did. We have a park that's like 7 minutes away that I would never now think of as an adventure, but it was. It has like this little man-made pond and like a
Oh,
playground and like lots of land around it. And that's genuinely how we started. Like we started like paying attention to the turtles when we would go and seeing if like the heron was visiting that day and like looking
mm,
at the ducks. And that for me was like my first step of adventure. And it's kind of
yes.
laughable if you were to see the park. But for me, it like built up my confidence, you know, and then
Mhm.
it was like, oh, a nature preserve that doesn't have a playground, you know, so that's really cool.
Yes, it's all about finding where, like, taking stock of where you're at with, and like, and you need to do it. I think you need to do it with blinders on, and you need to do it without social media. Like, you need to just take some, for all the moms who are thinking, like, I kind of want to do this adventure thing. Like, put all the technology away, go sit on your front porch or your backyard, whatever you have, like, sit outside and just think, where do you feel comfortable at right now? What's the aspiration? Like, what does a big adventure look like for you? What are you wanting to strive for? And then what can be that first step? And I think it's really important to do that, listening to your own heart and soul, and not what all of the, I mean, it's good to have vision boards, it's good to have action
Yeah.
boards, it's good to have those aspirational things, but if I would have started out like when my kids were, gosh, this is the last eclipse. So they were 6 and 3. And that was when my social media account really kind of started to gain some traction because my kids and I lived out of our van for a month on the road out
Wow.
west. And my husband built us a camper van out of our minivan, and he was completely supportive with us going.
That's amazing.
But if I would have jumped into that without all of the steps that I had previously taken, it would have been an utter disaster. Now, there were still disasters along the way, but I think it's really important to just recognize where you're at, where you want to be, and then the small steps you can take to get there.
You also mentioned, like, yes, we were going to homeschool, but we're very rarely home. And so
Guilty.
that that to me was super inspiring because I feel like I will see moms that are amazing at like cultivating a home environment. They're very structured or organized, or maybe they're a little bit more free spirited, but they're more about the home, being in the home, cultivating the home, homemaking, all the things that come along with that. And then I'll see on the other end, I'll see moms that are just so amazing at chasing adventure with their kids and maybe sometimes just on their own with other moms or solo or with their husband or a friend, but I haven't seen a ton of those two things married together. Now, I know that doesn't mean that like those moms that are super great at cultivating home are not having adventures, or those moms that are having adventures are obviously having to do stuff at home, right? But I feel like it's not necessarily reflected, or I'm not seeing it a lot. So I love when I'm seeing you like one day like on a kayak with your kids, like going to camp. I'm like, I don't know, like there was like a platform in the middle of the water somewhere,
Yes. It's on a
right?
river. Yep, yep.
And then the next day, I'll see you like in your homeschool room for what looks like a, you know, a typical homeschool day. So could you talk a little bit about like, was that, well, so now that kind of answers my question. I guess it was probably always a part of your homeschooling journey, but like, how do you balance it? Like, what are the pros? What are the cons? How do you make it work? Like, talk to me about the homeschool piece.
Oh,
Because
you
I
know
feel
what?
like so many people are going to want to know how that works.
I'm so glad you brought it up because I feel, like I obviously I'm enjoy social media and there's so many good things that can come out of it, but and I myself, if I'm not careful, it's really easy to slide into the comparison trap. And I think early on in our homeschool journey, I struggled hard because where we live, there's a lot of it's since changed, but when we first started homeschooling, 10 plus years ago, there was still a lot of very traditional box type homeschoolers, and I didn't even online, like I just didn't quite find a lot of people like me, and
Mm.
especially locally I didn't. And a lot of what I would see, in the homeschool platforms was so much of just beautiful, beautiful things that are wonderful, but they're not me. Like, I'm not going to make sourdough. Well, also I got diagnosed with celiac, but I'm not a bread making. I live in a suburban neighborhood. Chickens aren't even allowed. Just So the biggest turning point for me in all of this that like set me on this journey of wanting to share life the way that we do was because I felt like the biggest weight was lifted off my shoulders when I gave myself permission to embrace the type of mom that I am. So just like like when you're giving people advice to start homeschooling, it's really important to figure out like what's your style. And it took me a little while, but then when I finally realized like we're Charlotte Mason eclectic homeschoolers, it was like, what? This is amazing. I'm giving myself permission to homeschool the way that I want to homeschool.
Yeah.
But before I could do that, I had to give myself permission to be the mom that I am, which is like I don't even have the word people have made up for scrunchy moms who are, kind of crunchy but
Yeah.
not all the way crunchy. Like
Yeah.
I don't have a word for whatever this mess is, but it's a beautiful mess and I'm really grateful for it. And it allows me to bridge the gap between, you know what, yes, we have this absolutely wonderful homeschool space that I cherish. Yes, we do have a set curriculum that we use. Yes, we get our schoolwork done. Yes, my kids are involved in a ton of activities now, and we have a regular home that we love and appreciate very much. But we also have this extraordinary adventurous life that has been a thread through our entire homeschool, and I've fought hard to preserve that. But all of that happened because when my kids were really little, there was probably tears involved. But I remember going for a hike specifically by myself and just feeling like, you know what, I don't have to fit into these boxes that I keep seeing. And the really cool thing about that is once I made that decision, I discovered, like I discovered like wild and free homeschooling, and I was able to start a group here in my town. Um, and I know that I've been able to help inspire some of my absolutely amazing friends locally here to add a little bit of adventure into their homeschool life. So one of the most like pragmatic and like logistic things I can recommend is from the very beginning of our homeschool, we added in an adventure day. So this is like it doesn't even have to be a whole day, but it's an intentional time set aside every week for my kids and I to go on an adventure. Now, it's not a field trip, it's not a park meetup, it's not a like let me call what friends are available to meet us up at the park. It's just my kids and I. Sometimes there's this, again, I mentioned this park in our city has like a 10 miles of single track trails, but for years, when on weeks when we're really busy, that's our go-to. And we've hiked that trail more times than I can even count. Like I have pictures under this certain tree of my kids, like
Oh.
just get and with all three of our dogs that we've had and have since passed away, but just this repetition, right? So we talk
Yeah.
about like habit training and we talk about in Charlotte Mason building these habits. So this adventure day is a habit that I cultivated really early on. Um, and I'm so glad that I did. And for us it's Wednesday. I will fight tooth and nail to protect that day. I purposely don't schedule. My son is plays tennis at a pretty high level, and I like won't schedule any tennis lessons that day. We won't do field trips that day because it's our day. Sometimes we're canoeing out to an island on a lake to go camp on the lake overnight, or sometimes I'm surprising them and taking them to a movie theater, or sometimes it's a museum, or there's really no rules about what adventure day can look like. It was just for me, that was the best way that I could make sure that I was setting aside time, whether it's adventures that relate to whatever we're studying, like a trip to a museum, or it's completely irrelevant and just an injection of fun. So that's my best advice is setting aside time in your schedule. Like for us, we do have a set schedule. We do have a set curriculum. I think a lot of people think that because we're constantly adventuring, we're not getting our schoolwork done, but
Hmm.
we set aside intentional time for adventure, and then I am also selective about the curriculum that we use. It's portable, so it can come with us. That's the beauty of homeschooling is it can come with us, and that could be at my family's house in Arizona. It could be on a platform on a river, or it can be in the car.
I love that this conversation is shattering so many like possible misconceptions on so many levels. It's so good because before you actually came out and said it, I was thinking about how I feel like, based on just comments or whatever, that when we're adventuring, which is fairly often, people are assuming that like we just aren't, like we're not learning outside of that. Because I mean, we could spend a whole podcast talking about how like you actually could learn without curriculum and just adventuring, but I think it's really cool that you brought up the fact that you're like, no, we do actually have a selected curriculum that we follow. We have a schedule, like we're habit training. We follow certain principles because I feel like, once again, the home people versus the adventure people, or so it seems, right?
Yes,
Like it's one or
yes,
the other. And then there's like the formal educating versus like unschooling, as if there's like no way to kind of have a flow of both of those things in your life. And so I think it's really cool that you're talking about adventure being an aspect of habit training, because I feel like I don't know that I've heard that at all before, those two things mentioned together, but it seems like a duh thing for me. I'm like, yeah,
yep,
especially if you want to build like even just a love of nature study, right? Which is
yes,
total Charlotte Mason principle, right? And
yep.
yes, you can do that in your backyard or out your front window or at the local park, but you can also do that canoeing across a lake or hiking 10 miles of trails or whatever it may be. And then also the day before and the day after doing your traditional or not traditional curriculum for homeschooling. So I love that so much. I feel like I relate to that so much because we do that too. So we are using curriculums, a variety of them, because I'm a blender.
Yes,
Um,
same. I can't do the big box. It's not for me.
right,
But we
right.
we
But like
we
we
pull and
are,
choose. Yeah.
yeah. And then we're also having days where we do zero curriculum and we're adventuring and we're experiencing life, And so I love that you talked about that. Again, it doesn't have to be one or the other thing. So
Yes.
that's
Yes,
really,
exactly. And I
really
think,
good for moms to hear, I think.
oh, thank you. It's so funny because it's the type of thing that I really would have loved to have heard when I started down this journey. When I started sharing a little bit about like our adventures with my kids, they're just, almost 10 years ago, there weren't as many voices speaking to being like adventure mom. And I'm so glad that that's changed. I'm so glad that there's so many people speaking life into these adventures. But I think you're right. Like it's definitely possible to do both. And it does, there's also, I think on the flip side, there's the argument of, well, it's so hard when they're little and it's exhausting and they won't remember it. Like that entire month that we lived out of our minivan, wandering, gallivanting out west, my daughter doesn't remember any of it because she was 3. But because of that, and starting when they're younger, I have a 13 and 10-year-old now that can pack a backpack to go backpacking. They can pack to go on a canoe trip. They can handle 20 plus hours in the car. Um, they're very well seasoned travelers. And I also think let's just break one more wall while we're at it. I think it's really important for kids to get the time outside and to get the nature experiences and to know how to play and to have risky play and to go on these adventures. But I also want my kids to know how to act in an art museum. I want them to know how to appreciate going to the symphony. And so whatever myriad of life experiences are out there, I want so badly for my children to grow up with a zest for life and a joy in experiences. And I think it's important for those experiences to run the gamut. So that's where Adventure Day can be so helpful because sometimes we are climbing trees out in the woods, and sometimes well, now we stand at paddleboard because we all have our stand up paddleboards and everyone is happier in their own space now. Um, or we're going to see the symphony, or we're going, it's just there's such a wide range of adventures that we've been able to do because I protected that time and built those habits of like adventures are part of our homeschool.
I'll share something like my kids are covered in mud at a pond, like catching frogs or something like that. And it's like the one that goes semi-viral, right? And then you have
Of
all of the
course.
people, well, how are they ever going to know how to act civilized? Like these kids have like no experience
Right.
in civilization. I'm just dying because I'm like, I live in the suburbs also, and we go to the library and like
Yes.
listen to plays and, homeschool meetups. So it's again important to think about like all of the balance, right? Because you could
Mhm.
have all of those wild and free adventures, but then you can't take your kid to a play if they don't have like the experience of being in that setting. And I think that's what's really cool about homeschooling is that we can expose them to such a wide range of settings that they know, like you said, like how to pack a backpack for backpacking, and they know how to get dressed and behave in, an art museum or something like that. So I
It
think
is.
that
It's
also,
cumulative, it's just like their education, their bookwork, like learning to read allows them to reach higher levels of literature that they're able to read. Math skills build upon itself. These experiences build. So, while they might not remember all of the rocks that they threw into the pond, it's building into their experience bank, and they might not remember the road trips or the vacations or the canyons they've seen or whatever, but it is cumulative. So I think there's a lot of value in all of the beautiful riches that go into homeschooling, like starting those early, and adventure's all part of that.
Yeah, and it just be another habit that you're training for. That's so brilliant. Like I've never thought about it that way. So that's really cool. What is like your favorite adventure that you've ever had with your kids?
Oh my word. I knew you were going to ask this, and I had a really, really hard time narrowing it down. I think so I'm going to go back to in 2017. My husband built a sleeping platform out of our minivan. Like we had solar panels, I had an extra battery charger, and my kids were tiny, but that memory will always stick with me because we spent almost a month like wandering out west, just doing the whole like van life before it was really a thing, and it was minivan life, not van life. Um, but we just wandered out west. Like I remember we stayed at this tiny little cabin with no electricity in, I don't even remember where we were, Walden, Colorado. I remember like gasping with my kids at the night sky in southern Utah.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of nowhere, boondocking outside of, I think we were outside of Arches. And I just, like I live in suburbia, so like we are night sky nerds in my family, but we have so much light pollution where we live like that. So for us, anytime we're out camping, like being able to look at the night sky is such a thrill for us. And so I just remember absolutely gasping with my kids, and my son was like 6, but he's like, "Mom, I can see the Milky Way."
Oh,
That will forever stick with me. The first time I took my kids on a canoe camping trip was a really, really big deal for me because just like the feeling of mom's got this.
mm,
Even though like I will openly admit here, like there's plenty of times I'm terrified. In fact, sometimes it's almost debilitating anxiety, but I still make myself get out the door, because for me it's an exercise in trust and an exercise in my faith and just an exercise in proving to my kids that mom's got this. Now, it doesn't have to be loading a canoe on your car to take your kids canoe camping, but
mhm.
water sports in general. And so Arkansas, we're really lucky. We've got these amazing huge lakes that all have islands on them that you can paddle
Oh,
out to and
wow.
camp on. And so any of our canoe trips out to those islands, any of our stand-up paddleboarding trips out to those islands, are just wonderful. We've loved all of them. Um, Tide pooling with my kids in California and just hearing them, their shouts of delight, like it's Pagoo, the little, yeah, anyway, there's so many, it's so hard to narrow it down, but
So
I think
fun.
the vast majority, and in fact, all of my top experiences are things that revolve around nature. As they've gotten
Mm,
older, there's like, other random things we did. Like this past August, we went to Las Vegas. What? Who? Why? I never thought I would do that. But we did, and we stayed at this hotel on a Sunday night because it was $300 cheaper, where we could overlook the Bellagio fountains because I was not going to be on the strip. Well, it was like 11:30 and my son said, "Hey, what if we go drive down the strip?" I was like, "Let's do it," because I have big kids now, right? We can go do the
yeah.
things. And so like we're not Vegas people. Um,
Hmm.
but I'll never forget that because
Right.
he had the idea. I said yes, and it took us like an hour and a half because the traffic was insane. And so
Mm.
we saw a lot of things, um, unique things. But it's just, I think it boils down to this. It boils down to me holding on to this like joyous, adventurous, yes type attitude, even though I know things are going to be hard and complicated. Like
Yeah.
flights will get canceled. You're gonna have a flat tire. You're gonna forget things. You're gonna be at the place on the wrong night because the reservation is a week ago. Things just happen. And I think if you have an attitude of recognizing that things are gonna happen, it is not the end of the world. We can roll with it. We can figure it out. We can move to plan B, C, D, E, or F.
Hmm.
So I guess just it's really hard to narrow it down because I have so many amazing memories just because we took the chance and we said yes.
I love that you couldn't pick one because I feel like it's a beautiful commercial for just going for it. There's all these amazing memories that you can have in all these different ways with your kids if you just go for it. So I
Yes. And
love
sometimes it's not at all what you would expect. Like, I to reference this trip we took in last August, it was partial work, partial fun. Part of it was to stay at the Star Wars resort in southern Utah. That was like the coolest experience of our lives. Um, I would have thought it was that, or I would have thought it was this waterfall hike. But, truthfully, like my favorite memory is just the goofball conversation we had back where we were camping that night, late at night. Yeah,
Yeah.
you never know what moments are going to stick and what moments are really going to be those moments you feel your hearts knitting closer together.
Yeah.
But it's not always, there's definitely some big things that have been my favorites, but it's not always the big things.
Yeah. It's so funny when you said the thing about your son saying, like, let's go do this? And you're like, yes, I'm laughing because just those times that it's usually my older two sons because they're 13 and 17. Mostly my
Yes.
13-year-old, though, will be the one to like ask me something. And every once in a while, I'll surprise him and be like, okay. And he's like, wait, seriously? Like, I didn't think you were going to say yes. And so it's
Yes.
funny because then it becomes a really cool memory and
Hmm.
a bonding point because then they're like, Mom, you're cool, you know?
Yes. Which is the best. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when they're 13, right? Like, if you can
Yes.
be cool when they're 13,
Yes.
you've got it. Oh,
Yes.
that's so
For
funny.
sure.
Okay. So what about like your worst adventure or your craziest one or like a misadventure story? Do you have a good
Oh
one?
boy, yeah, I do. Um, I think again, it comes with the territory. It comes with the territory. I think if you, not that I'm going into anything with low expectations, but this whole thing, this way that we live our life, I call it being responsibly brave. And
Mm,
I came up with it, when my kids were really, really tiny because I was getting all of these questions like, well, aren't you scared? What if something's going to happen? The world is a big, scary place, and
mm,
people are out there and bears are out there. And um, so I came up with the term responsibly brave because I wanted to clarify that I'm not going into, a lot of what we do is very spontaneous, and I'm all about the shenanigans and we go have a great time, but I'm kind of, I'm like the duck. Like you don't see how hard they're paddling underwater, and what's not always visible is all of the work that I put into planning and preparing and
mm.
having an exit strategy and having plan A, B, C, and D. Well, sometimes you get to plan F and then your plans run out and things still go wrong,
Yeah.
which has definitely happened to us. But I think just going into it knowing that I've planned for this, I've prepped for this, things are gonna go wrong, and if they go wrong, it's okay.
Mm.
Um, I love how Greta Eskridge always talks about like it'll make a great memory later. She's
Yes.
Mom Pa Modern on Instagram, and
Yes.
um, just how these misadventures also make really great stories. And so what's funny is one of my well, we've had a couple of things happen. Okay, I'll tell two really quick. And I might have shared
Okay.
these before where other people may have heard these stories before. So if you have, just shh. Um, the first time I took my kids tent camping by myself was when they were 5 and 2, I think, or was it that same year they were 6 and 3? We were dispersed tent camping like deep in the woods. It was technically a campground, but it was one of those campgrounds where like there's no hookups. It's very, very Forest Service managed.
Yeah.
Um, and so we had read Charlotte's Web. We had this like beautiful little homeschooly dinner. We did s'mores, we did all the things. And I was getting us ready for bed, and there was this like rustling kind of in the underbrush, and there's nobody around because of course it's midweek. There's nobody there. And so there are bears in the area. I was fully prepared, so I thought, all right, well, this isn't going away. This rustling's getting closer, and like the tops of the underbrush is starting to move around. I'm thinking, what in
Oh
the
boy.
world? So, again, I'm like trying not to panic in front of my kids. So I told the kids, like, you guys go get back in the truck. So I got them in the truck and I pulled out this, like, I'm kid you not, it was a hatchet. I have a mini
Oh
hatchet in the
goodness.
truck, and I was ready to defend like children, like with my life and my hatchet.
Yeah.
It was an armadillo.
Oh.
We have a lot of those down here, and they will tear up just like pigs. Like pigs and armadillos will tear up your yard, and
Mhm.
they make a lot of noise and they wiggle a
Right.
lot of branches. So we had a really good laugh about that. It came back in the middle of the night and was like snuffling the tent, which is always a terrifying feeling.
Right.
So that was misadventure, luckily, that ended up in some laughs. Another big one was when, again, like I'm gonna go back to this big trip that was the catalyst for all of our adventures, was this
Mhm.
month in the minivan. So it was a high point and it was a low point because we were going to stay at Monument Valley. but I wasn't really impressed with the campground. And I was like, this isn't it. Because I don't know if anyone's camped at Monument Valley, if you don't have an actual RV and you're gonna like sleep in your car or you're going to tent camp, it is not ideal because it's all
Mhm.
on rocks and like I could reach out my car window and touch the RV next to us. So I was like, forget it. We're just gonna keep driving. So I think we drove to Page, Arizona. I found a hotel, not realizing it was like a conference center. So my kids were both asleep because it was midnight. Um, so I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I left them asleep in the car. I got, I should have just used a luggage rack. I don't know why I didn't, hindsight. Um, but I got like my bed, the overnight bag that we needed, and I got my daughter out of the car. My son's still asleep in the car, so I like locked him in the car, ran upstairs, put my daughter on the bed. She's sleeping. I'm like, okay, she's 3. I was like, I'm gonna let her sleep. I'm gonna
Like,
run down
please
and
don't
get my
wake
son.
up.
Right. Never in my life have I been so stressed. Like this is minor in the big scheme of things, but at the time it was a very, very big deal.
Yeah.
And so because it was a conference center, I like ran down the stairs, ran outside, not realizing I was on like the completely opposite side of the building of the car. So I was
Oh no.
barreling full speed around the building, like smashed into a group of German tourists who were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm so sorry." Luckily, my son was still asleep. I got him. We got up to the room, and my daughter was just like sitting in the middle of the bed, looking
Oh.
around, like, "This is different." So it all worked out, but it was one of those moments where I was like, "Okay, I am the adult here, and I have to handle this."
Hmm.
Um, so we handled it. I have had a couple of I don't want to say scary, but questionable experiences with like people pulling up on our campsite. I don't like campgrounds. We usually disperse camp like out in the woods away from people. And I have had some experiences where I had to like get out of the tent with my knife.
Mm,
But it's not because there was any insidious things happening. They just didn't see our car, because they had pulled way down this dirt road. And but
gotcha.
again, like it comes with the territory. So
Right.
if you can build up your confidence and realize like, you know what, stuff's gonna happen, stuff's gonna go wrong, but I trust myself,
Mm.
that I will figure out a way to handle it and it'll all be okay.
Yeah, and I like how you're talking about like being prepared, like thinking about, okay, like what are the possible scenarios? Not like
Hmm.
driving yourself completely crazy and having all kinds of intrusive
Right.
thoughts, but like responsibly thinking like, okay, what are some things I need to be prepared for, and then being prepared for them, and then just,
Yeah,
going with
exactly.
it.
Like, I mean, even I've not because I'm again, like the fear walks right alongside me on these adventures,
Mhm.
which is why I came up with these responsibly brave. And one thing I always did was when we were traveling, I taught my kids never to like usually it's well-meaning elderly who just want to like be friendly and talk with the kids, but I've taught them to never
Mm,
give their names to strangers. I taught them to never answer where we're from or where we're going. So a lot of times, like if you're at a campground or museum, you've got little kids, they're cute, people want to strike up conversation.
mm,
Oh, what's your name? And for me personally, I just taught them like these are questions you don't answer, and I don't even answer them. Like if someone asks me where are
yeah,
you from, I'm very vague. If they ask me where we're
so
going,
good.
I'm very vague. Even if I have like no spidey sense tingling and they seem like a
Mm,
perfectly safe person,
yeah.
those are just some tips that I have. But I also think it's important for us as women to just listen to your intuition.
Mm,
So often you got to be nice, you got to be nice to everybody. And there's been times I've been some really rude to some like there was a guy who like him and his girlfriend went to go like take a shower at this waterfall in the middle of nowhere at the woods, and I was like, okay, this is creepy and bizarre.
yeah.
Hope your soap's biodegradable, but I think just so my whole point is going along with being responsibly brave also means listening to your intuition. And
Mm,
I believe very strongly in situational awareness being the most important um, tool in your kit, because if you have excellent situational awareness, even when you're tired, even when your kids are crying, you're going to keep yourself safe most of the time.
and the fact that you have those conversations ahead of time with your kids, so you're not waiting till you're like tired or put on the spot, or they
Yes.
are,
Yes.
they're tired or put on the spot and don't really know how to respond to situations. So I think it's really important that you brought up like being on the same page before you're in those situations. Like, this is what we do if this happens. This is what we do
Yeah.
in this situation. This is what we say if we're asked this question or don't say.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
follow? I can't think of her handle right now, but the Lie to Stay Alive lady is like all I can think. She
Ooh,
has all
no,
these
but that
videos,
sounds great.
and
Yeah.
one of her like biggest lines that she always says is "Lie to Stay Alive," and she has all these different scenarios where she
Hmm.
talks about situational awareness for women, for moms, for, all these
Yeah.
different situations. So I'll have to find her and send it to you because
Yeah, that sounds
if you
great.
don't already follow her, you'd love her.
Which is like a whole other crisis of when you've got kids. You're like, wait, but mom, you're telling me to lie? Yes, in this situation, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So like it's a great opportunity for learning, starting when they're young, just to have them get an understanding of why we do these things.
Yeah.
So
When it
many
has to
fun
do with
learning
your safety,
opportunities.
yes,
Yeah,
why?
yeah. Oh, and then the other thing is having some word or saying or like something that you say so they know like if you say this word, that means come with me, no questions asked. Um, no, which it's hard when they're little, but like if
I
you're at a
know.
playground and something, or you're on a trail or in the woods or at a campground and something is making you as a mom feel uncomfortable, like listen to that, don't shove it down. And that's where having, a certain phrase or a word that you can tell your kids that they know instantly, like don't ask questions, don't ask why, come with me right now, and I'll explain it later when I've had to use that phrase. Obviously, when we get back in the car, I explain what's going on, and 9 times out of 10 my kids will say, "Yeah, mom, I had that same feeling." Um, so those are just important tools, I think, to add to your adventure habit training.
Yeah, and that's another great excuse or good reason to have them out in these situations that you've prepared them for ahead of time, is having the experience of like knowing when something doesn't feel right and how you handle that situation instead of
Hmm.
never having practice being in a situation where something doesn't feel right and you have to make a judgment call. So I feel
Yeah.
like that's another really great thing to train our kids to do that we don't necessarily talk about a lot or hear about a
Hmm.
lot, or at least I know I don't. So
Right.
that's really, really important to think about. Like I'm like mentally taking notes myself of like, okay, these are things I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job at, especially if we're going to be adventuring. So thank you for bringing those up.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I know one of the hesitations that I hear from some moms when they'll say like, "Oh, I see her here and there and everywhere." Like, I would love to do that, but like my kid's in football, or like we have baseball, and we could never just like travel as much as you or go on adventures or whatever it may be. So I know that you've mentioned before about like finding a way to navigate both, like your kids being in organized sports or organized whatever, and also being able to like be spontaneous and be adventurous and it not having to be like one or the other. Like either my kids are in sports or we're adventurers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I would love to. That's actually something I'm really passionate about, especially as my kids have gotten older and we're kind of entering this like big, well, not entering. I am the mom with the big kids now. Um, a couple of months ago, I got to sit down with Sarah from Run Wild My Child, and we
Hmm.
sat down and talked about this whole premise about how, there's this idea that you're either so I'm going to speak specifically to like the homeschool circles, but this applies to
Yeah.
everybody. The Run Wild conversation was, for everybody, traditional school, homeschooled, whatever. But specifically in a homeschool, there's the idea that, as you mentioned, like you're either opting out completely so you can go live this adventurous life,
Hmm.
because it's not possible to do both. So again, I agree with you. It is possible to do both. And obviously we've had to make adjustments. Like I can't just get in the car and take off for 2 weeks at a time, which we used to do all the time when my kids were little. I put so many miles on my car. Because we had the flexibility to do so. School was easy. It could come with us. Now I'm looking at my son will be a freshman in high school next year, and my daughter will be in middle school. And things are changing. Things are changing. So in Arkansas, homeschoolers are allowed to do the public school sports. So that's something that's always been on our horizon. My son plays tennis at a pretty high level. What's fun, but also hard is he doesn't have a team he's been able to participate with. It's just been me taking him to all of these competitions, which is an
Oh,
adventure
wow.
in of itself because we get to
Hmm.
travel to, these places and do the tournaments, and we have made great memories along the way, and I have fun one-on-one time with him. So that's kind of his thing that is going to start chomping up more of his time next year as he plays with the high school. And then my daughter has always played soccer from the time she was really little. But this past year, we've leveled it up because she is on a club travel soccer team. And then she also is phenomenal at theater. The last show she was in, she actually got to have one of the lead roles. And we're very
Wow.
blessed that we have this amazing children's theater right here in our city. But all those things take time. So I
Yeah.
think there's, there's the idea that you can't have both. And I really, really want to dispel that. You have to be selective. And now I'm not,
Hmm.
like our kids are not the kids who are going to be playing six different sports. Like that's just not, we can't afford that, first of all.
Right.
It's not economical for us. And there's only so much time in the day. Unfortunately, where we live, we don't have any homeschool sports leagues. So I can't have sports practice during the day. It's all in the
Right.
evenings. Um, I think you just have to pick. So we always felt very strongly that we wanted our kids to experience taking direction and coaching and um, just taking instruction from someone else because I obviously, as their homeschool, as the mom, I'm teaching everything, and we wanted them to take instruction from someone else. So we wanted them to have a thing. Now, we didn't care if that was art, coding, music, sports, whatever, and they've both just gravitated towards their things, which for my son, it's all tennis, and for my daughter, it's soccer and theater. Um, it is possible to do both, but you do have to pick, which is a really hard lesson. And as my daughter progresses with theater and with soccer, eventually she might have to pick, which is really hard, but also in real life, we have to pick what our priorities are. And again, this all comes back to that adventure day. So why is adventure day on Wednesdays? We don't have sports practice on Wednesdays. So
That's great.
I
Yeah.
purposely make it so that like, all right, this is the night we don't have tennis, we don't have soccer. I don't schedule any of our private lessons that day. Um, and so the Wednesday is our adventure day. Now then, when it comes to the travel soccer, there's always ways to tag on adventures. So like if we're out
Mm.
of town for the weekend for a soccer or a tennis tournament, you bet I'm looking at what museums are around.
Yeah.
Like we've got a soccer tournament coming up in Memphis in a couple of months, and Hamilton is showing
Yes.
in Memphis, and my daughter's a big Broadway fan, and I am too.
Oh,
And so we're
yeah.
just, it's a lot of work. Again, as a mom, you're going to be the duck, like paddling under the surface to find ways
Right.
to fit all of this in. And you
Yeah.
can fit all of it in. You just have to be really strategic. And for us, that means being selective about what activities our kids are choosing to do. And
Mm.
it's not us choosing for them, it's them saying, this is what we want to do and this is what we want to
Right.
pursue. But then just protecting your time the best you can. So I stack as many things as I can on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday to make,
Hmm.
sometimes those days are a little bit chaotic. Dinners at like 9 o'clock at night.
Hmm.
But Wednesday's open to have our adventure day. So just like I talked about, the adventure is a mindset, and it's an attitude that you have to have. Like it's also a mindset and an attitude that you have to have that you're going into this saying, we're gonna have one foot in all of these different spheres, and that's
Hmm.
okay. And it means as a mom, like I'm gonna have to make sure my planner's up to date and make sure that everything is lined
Hmm.
out. But if you just prioritize your time, it can be as simple as like, hey, guess what? There's a pond behind the soccer field. Let's go throw a pole in, or don't throw your pole in, throw a line in, and fish. Or if there's like a nature preserve that's really close to wherever the sport event is, like go spend some
Hmm.
time. And also my kids picked outdoor sports, which I love. So
That's
soccer
great.
and tennis
Yeah.
are both outdoors, and they're very, very valuable life skills that they're gaining from these
Yeah.
experiences. So it's all an adventure, and I think it is definitely possible to do both. It just looks a little different, and that's okay.
Yeah. I love that too. I really had a season where my kids weren't really involved. Like, so in the beginning, when my older two boys were younger, we did lots of organized sports. It was like we were always doing a sport. And then we went through a season, and I think what kind of broke that up, I mean, I think it broke up a little bit before COVID, like it slowed down for us personally, but then obviously with COVID. And
Yeah.
then we didn't pick it right back up after. And to be honest, I was like, oh, I love this. I
Yes.
was like, I love not having to go to like soccer practice and basketball game. And, like every season there's a sport and, running from one thing to another. But then I got like so stuck on that I was kind of stubborn, where I was like, nope, I like our wild and free lifestyle. We will not be partaking in organized sports. And then I had two children in particular that were like, I really want to do this. And at first, I'm going to
Mhm.
be honest, I was like, I am not being tied to that. I am not. It
Mhm.
is so much money. It is so much time. I do not want that dictating our schedule,
Yes.
And then I finally, with my husband's encouragement, God bless him, he was like, okay, I think we can find a way like to make this work. Like they really want to do this. For my daughter, it was gymnastics, and for one of my
Oh,
sons, it was basketball. And so, yes, like, sometimes we do miss every once in a while, we have to miss. And I communicate with the coaches, like when we sign up, like,
yes.
hey, this is kind of our lifestyle. This is what I do for work. This is kind of like we homeschool and we travel and these things. And for my daughter, it wasn't the only deciding factor. I don't think we would have done it anyway, but she was invited to be on the Junior Olympics training team for gymnastics. And it was one of the considerations, definitely not the top consideration, was like, well, you're not really missing practices. You're there 3 times a week. They're spread out across the week, so it doesn't really leave you any room to travel. I'm like, that's kind of a deal breaker for me. But
Yeah.
they did have a travel or a competitive team below that is designed for kids who want to be in other sports or just aren't able to do that time
Oh, that's
commitment.
great.
And so, like you said, you just have to be selective and adjust. It's not like one thing or the other. They can still do it. And I think it was the better choice anyway for her because to me, it was a lot. In our situation, it was a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of time, a lot of money, just a lot
Yeah.
in that age.
Yeah.
She's young. She's only 9. She's very talented, but she's only 9. And then
Yeah.
for my son, same thing. Like, which travel team has practices on days that like are going to work for us, or is it games on certain days that will work for us, and just finding ways. So I think
Yeah,
everyone
it's
appreciates
a
that we've found a balance.
well, you too. And I do think, again, like the way that I share things is it's never, I get asked this a lot, and I didn't choose to homeschool because we thought it was a better than decision, or I don't think something else is a less than decision. Just like I don't think if someone chooses not to do sports, like that's whatever. I don't care. You do you,
Yeah.
man. I'm gonna cheer from the sidelines no matter what. But I do think there's a valuable lesson in our kids watching us learn how to manage our time.
Mm,
And I think it's a valuable thing for them to learn how to manage their time. For example, like I grew up on the flip side of that where my time was dictated for me because I had early bird classes and I had class all day long. And then I had like 4 hours of swimming and all the extra stuff in the evenings. And
wow.
so like free time didn't exist for me. So I, after college and even in college, like struggled a little bit with time management because I never had the opportunity to kind of navigate how to time manage on my own. Now,
Yeah.
like I'm the firstborn daughter. I'm very much a like spontaneous, like fun type of person, but I'm still gonna be very like dot my I's, cross my T's.
Mm,
Anyway, I think you get what I'm saying.
yes.
But my point is, I feel like there's a lot of value in giving our kids the opportunities to learn how to manage their time. And so I think for us as homeschoolers, we have this beautiful gift of free time, right? Like we get to decide how our days go. And I do feel that having some structure is in like this is what we do on these days. Wednesday's adventure day, that's our fun day. Um, but them choosing the activities that they want to be involved in,
Mm,
and then having some of that structure on their time, I think it's really important for them to learn that because as they grow older and move into the real world, they're going to have pressures on their time and they need to know how to manage that and they need to know how to make choices that uphold what their personal values are, that still allow them to support themselves, if that makes any sense.
yeah.
So I think it's possible to be an adventurous, outdoor shenanigan chasing family who also happens to be involved in extracurricular activities.
Mm, yeah. With my oldest son, he's 17 and he has a job and drives a car now, which is insane. And even with like his job selection, like that did have to come into consideration. Like you are
Right.
going to have a job that is flexible,
Yep.
and he is blessed enough to have one and that he really likes, but it has also helped him in one of his weakest areas, which is time management,
Hmm.
having to have a schedule and be there, and it's flexible for our lifestyle, but on a day that he has work, right? Like he
Yes.
has to learn how to manage that time
Yeah.
effectively. So yeah, it is true. It definitely helps,
Oh,
when you
that's so
have
good to
those
hear.
organized things, whether it be a work or a sport. So
Mhm. And
yeah.
the organized thing can be whatever it is, and I just think there's value in having boundaries on your time, whatever those boundaries might be.
Yeah, and we get to choose those, which is kind of nice.
Exactly.
We
That's
get
the
to
best
choose what the
part.
boundaries are gonna be.
So, like, we have structure and boundaries on Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, I get to surprise them with whatever shenanigan we're gonna go chase. And I'm grateful for it because choosing this adventurous life and choosing to say yes to the wonder, um, and just being able to look at life with this like joy-filled creative outlook is I feel the greatest gift that I can give to my kids. And
Yeah.
for us, homeschooling was never a choice out of fear. It was
Mhm.
a choice out of, what this is what's best for our family. My husband is amazing at his job and he works really hard, and his time off is a little bit, it's a little bit different. And I never wanted him to, I didn't want to have to fight to get time off at like spring break and Christmas and summer
Right.
break. I wanted flexibility. Now we don't have that because sports season has changed things, but
Hmm.
I wanted to be able to say, hey, let's go take a family vacation. And we're not bounded by other time constraints. So yes, we get to set
Yeah.
the boundaries on our time, and I do feel like it's a choice that we will never ever regret.
Yeah. Agreed. So you mentioned Greta Eskridge, and I know we
Hmm.
have to end soon, but she's a huge inspiration for me. And I wanted to ask you anyway, are there certain podcasts, books, people that you follow that are an inspiration to you, that inspire you to like keep adventuring or to keep finding ways that you can, marry two parts of life together without it being one or the other?
Ooh, early on, I would say a catalyst for this entire way that we live. There's two books. One of them is Free to Learn by Peter Gray, and the other one is Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv.
Mm-hmm.
So those were two books that I read really early on that kind of shaped my outlook on the type of mom that I wanted to be, and shaped and led me to that choice to embracing the type of mom that I want to be. Those were two really big things. The whole wild and free homeschool movement was a really big deal for me because when I discovered it on Instagram, like in 2018, I was like a breath of fresh air, and just
Yeah,
thought, wow, there's other moms out there like me who would
yeah,
rather like ditch the books and get in the car and like go chase the sunset because it's pretty.
yeah,
So that was really, really freeing to me. But then also so like social media gets such a bad rap sometimes, but just I've been really lucky that I've found an incredible community of friends and acquaintances and just people that I know and the circles I run in on Instagram. Um, I'm grateful for all of them. It's so hard to pick out one specifically, but I would say for certain those two books, Free to Learn, and Last Child in the Woods, were two that like were a huge inspiration for me. And then I think, I think it's important to take inspiration without create without idolization. So I think it
mm,
can also be really easy to spend so much time looking at inspirational accounts that you forget that like you can be your own inspiration. And so I think
yeah,
I also tend to just lean pretty hard into like I know this is what's right for our family. Um, and go for it. But I think if you look up like adventure mama hashtags on Instagram, it's so hard to narrow it down because there's literally thousands of women that I look up to.
yeah.
All of you, everybody listening, like we're choosing to do life on our terms and what's best for our family. And I will for always and forever
Hmm.
applaud that.
So I have my last question is kind of a two-part question, so I'm kind of cheating because it's sort of two questions. But I want to ask you if you have any like exciting projects or things coming up. I know that you have a variety of different places that you share. Um, and then also alongside that, I know there are going to be moms that are hearing this and are inspired by everything that you shared and want to, have more encouragement and more inspiration as time goes on. And maybe, a couple weeks from the podcast and they need a little bit more encouragement. Like, what are the best places for them to find you?
Oh, thank you. I do. I think, I mean, you know this too, like as a creator and a mom, like we wear so many different hats and there's so many different like avenues that I'm pouring my creative efforts. I'm on the executive team for Run Wild My Child. So we have launched a print magazine, which it's the only print magazine that's out there for adventurous kids and families. And I think it's so beautiful to return to print because it holds true to what our message and our core value is, which is getting kids and families together outdoors and off screens.
Yeah.
So these magazines are beautiful and you can take it with you on your adventures. I just had an article in this winter bundle that was all about being responsibly brave. So I kind of expand on that idea a little bit more in that magazine. So that's a really fun subscription. But also just like the Run Wild My Child social media pages are great. And that's managed by Sarah McCarty. And there's kind of a group of five of us who help orchestrate that. But for me personally, my Instagram page, Coley Ray, is the best place to go. I, probably 4 years ago, I launched my Responsibly Brave Challenge course. I've run it, I think, 3 times, and I've had 800 people go through it.
Wow.
It was a free 3-month program where it was delivered once weekly to your email inbox. Um, I haven't ran it for a while, and I had repackaged it into like a digital download, and then I quit that. So I'm in the process of revamping the whole thing, and I'll be launching it again soon as an email challenge, but it's really designed for anyone, any mom who wants, women specifically, it's designed for moms, any mom who wants to get out and start adventuring. I mean, I break it down to the nitty gritty of all the things that I do that have allowed us to adventure the way that we do. So it covers everything from like what to pack in your backpack to how to find these adventures to safety tips, all of it. So I'm relaunching that soon. I
I'm
do have
excited. So I'm going to need the
thank
details when
you.
that
Yeah,
comes
so
out.
I have a link I'll send you. It is an email opt-in right now, and I send newsletters out like once every couple months. But I really am trying to be intentional about, as you know, like social media is so volatile and you never know what's going to happen, but I am really passionate about this Responsibly Brave idea. Obviously, like so many people, there's dreams of writing a book someday, but for right now, I'm just hoping to help as many women as I can. So I'll be relaunching that soon. My Responsibly Brave 12-week course. I have
Yay.
that. And then I've had a lot of doors open for me locally with doing kind of the travel adventure blogging for my local region, which doesn't have anything to do with my Coley Ray page. It's just kind of a whole other bucket I've been pouring some effort into. So
So
I'm really
cool.
excited about that. Yeah, and if anybody wants to talk more about like that pivot that I made, I'm happy to talk about it because it was a very unexpected pivot, but it opened some really amazing doors. I just realized, we're not able to take off as much as we used to, and I'm not able to work with as many like far-reaching tourism boards as I used to, or even just go
Right.
explore with my kids as much as we used to. So I made a pivot that ended up working really well, and it has totally different social media pages. So I won't go into that because it's very specific to the Arklatex, which if you know what I'm talking about, you're amazing because nobody knows that area, but it's like an
That's
area
really
in
cool.
Southwest Arkansas, East Texas. So if you're from there, let's chat. But yeah, mostly just my Instagram page is the best place to stay in touch. I don't post super regularly on there, but I've moved away from like a lot of the travel influencer stuff on there, and it's a lot more just snapshots of really real life. I am not very polished as far as the visuals that you're going to get. I'm comfortably on the cusp of like mid-sized to plus-size adventure mama, so I'm sharing the really real gear that I use, the really real things that I use for my family, the things that work for us, just really real, I guess is what it comes down to. Follow me at Coley Ray for all of the wild and crazy. You'll never know what you're going to get, but I hope you'll join me.
And that's what I love about you because it is so real and so relatable. So I will make sure to link your Instagram and then also definitely your email opt-in so that people can, when it does come out, your course does come out, they'll know where to find it and they'll get the info for it and all of that.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much. This was so much fun. I could talk to you all day.
I know. Sorry this ran on for so long, but this was really great.
No, that's okay. So thank you so much. I can't wait to talk with you more soon and for everyone to get to listen in on our conversation. I hope you enjoyed sitting down with Nicole and I to talk all about chasing adventure with our kids. All of Nicole's contact info will be in the show notes, so be sure to connect with her in the various places that she mentioned. I hope to see you soon on our next episode of the Rooted Home Life podcast. Until next time, stay rooted.